Alright, I'm just gathering materials to prep this sheath stitching. I made the sheath last night, dyed it, cut it out, put on the copper riveting, did all my stitch track marks, and did that after I completed the blade. This is a knife that I made yesterday. This is called the Apache Ghost. It's basically based on a buoy design. It's got a forced patina on it. It's made out of 80 CRV2 high carbon steel. Leather wrap. Kind of has that old frontier rustic vintage look to it. And this one is going to a friend in North Carolina. So let's see, I gotta grab I've got to drill into these holes. So I've got to change my Dremel tip. I'm going to put a small drill bit on this. Basically, so rather than running a needle through the leather, which can be pretty tough, one technique I use is I use a Dremel bit. After I lay the stitch line, I have a little tool that I made out of a crab spoon. This is the end of a crab spoon here, and that's how I lay my stitch holes inside the stitch line. So you do that all the way around, you get a nice even spacing, and then I go over it with a Dremel. So what I do here is make sure my everything's aligned. It is. So I'm going to take the sheath, grab some glue, I'm just going to put a bead. This kind of holds the welt in place until stitching's completed, and I'm just using leather glue. It's kind of a almost like a cement glue. All right, so and I'm going to sandwich everything together. I'm going to reach over and grab some small clamps. These. A few more over here. This glue dries fairly quick, so we'll let that sit for a second. I'm going to grab some tissue here and clean up some of the excess. So I got a good amount down here. And this sheath I made a kind of a leg drop loop for it. Okay. Yep, dropped out. Okay, I think we got everything lined up. Okay, now I'm gonna start drilling the stitch holes. So now I'm grabbing artificial sinew. This is about double arm's length and then length of one arm. So I'm grabbing my two ends of my sinew. Now I'm going to grab two needles. I'm going to feed one in through one eyelet. Leave about 2 to 3 inches of excess on the end, fold it over, lay it aside, take my second end, feed it through the eyelet, 2 to 3 inches of overlap. So now I've got each end of my artificial sinew with a needle, and the stitch that we're going to use is called a saddle stitch. Oh, that end came out. Let me put this back in there. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do a saddle stitch, and we're going to go ahead and start at the top here. So I'm going to feed it through the first hole, one needle. I'm going to pull that needle all the way through while holding my second needle, and I'm essentially going to go to the center of the length, so there's an equal amount of sinew on each side of on each needle end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay one needle aside, so let's lay that needle aside, and I'm going to take this side of this needle, and in order to do a saddle stitch you go immediately to the hole above it. So the needle attached to this end of the sinew is going to go above all the way through, pull it, give it a little tug, set it aside, grab the needle from the opposite side, and that's coming out of this length of thread here. So I'm going to go to the immediate hole above it, even though the first needle came out of that hole, you're still going to go into the hole just above it. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. Pulling it through. Set it aside, grab both ends, and give it a nice tug. So what you end up with is this first stitch, and it should look exactly the same on the back side. So what we're basically doing is we're weaving the sinew through the holes back around into the next hole, and so we're just doing that the whole way, and that's how you end up with a saddle stitch. And so it can take a little bit of getting used to. You can use what's called a saddle, which is a wooden device that holds the sheath in place. I actually have one, but I don't really care to use it all that much. So, all right, and then you just repeat. So I'm grabbing the needle on this end, go to the hole right above it, pull, tug. So now we've got our second stitch, and it should look exactly the same on the back side. There we go. I'll remove that clamp. Hole above it, pull, set aside, next needle, hole above it, pull all the way through, tug, third stitch, same on each side. All right, so I'm going to continue through and do that, and then I'm going to show kind of a little trick to speed things up. So I'll do a few stitches using the method that I just described. And it doesn't really matter which needle you start off with first. The idea is that the stitch is going to look the same. Okay, this needle came off the end. That happens. Grab it. Set it aside. Next needle, hole above. Tug. Check our stitches, straight, straight. I'll do one more set and then switch to a different method. Tug. Move this aside here. Okay, so the other method that can be used, it's a little bit faster, is to take a needle. In this case, I'm going to use the needle that's coming out of this hole here. I'm going to go into the hole immediately above it. I'm going to pull it all the way through, give it a little tug, and instead of letting it go and switching needles, I'm going to immediately go into the hole above it. And I'll give it a tug again. And once again, not letting go of that same needle, continue to go into the hole above. So that's one complete stitch, and I'll keep going with that same needle, and I'll do 3 complete sets of stitches, each time giving it a little tug. That's 2. This is the third one. Through. Oops, got wrapped up here. Give it a tug. And so you can see where the hole's been skipped because I've only been using one needle. So once I've done 3 stitches using that needle, I'll set it aside, grab the other one, and I'll pick up where I left off. So go right into the hole above it. Pull, gentle tug, next hole. So rather than switching the needle at each hole, you can do 3. Once you get the hang of it, you can do about 3 sets of stitches with the same needle. And it saves you time from having to drop the needle and switching. And you get a real nice, clean, even stitch pattern. Sometimes it can be a little tough getting these needles through. You can tug the back side, straighten it out a bit. There we go. Okay, now that I've completed 3 on each needle, I'll give it a stronger pull just to make sure everything sets. Clean. And a clean stitch line. So I'm going to continue doing that. So once I finish stitching this sheath, I got to check for fitment, make sure that the knife sits in the sheath well, and I'll make adjustments from there. So I may need to put a copper rivet in this sheath. What I don't want is I don't want the knife to protrude from the bottom of the sheath. So there's a leather welt that runs along the stitching and protects the stitching. And so that welt protects, prevents that from happening, but it can still, if there's enough force generated, I mean, the knife will punch right through, regardless of whether you have a welt or not. So it's important that you have some type of stopping, device built into your sheath to, mitigate that from happening. So I could put like a copper, this is the mouth of the sheath, so I can put a copper rivet somewhere in there so that the blade has a stopping point before the tip of the edge gets to the end of the sheath. But we'll check that here in a bit. And this sheath is made out of 100% veg tan, and it's off of a double shoulder piece of cowhide that I bought. That's what I make my sheaths out of. And there are no machines being used here, all hands. So I got into knife making several years back. I actually started by making sheaths because I had a lot of good knives, but they came with junk sheaths. And so I started off making leather sheaths, taught myself, self-taught how to make leather sheaths, learn the stitching, learn the terminology and the different types of leather, and just started making sheaths. And you learn from failure, and it's kind of where I'm at today. So once I got decent at making sheaths, and I'm like, well, I've already invested time into learning how to make a sheath. So I started reading and learning about knife making. So if anybody wants to get into knife making, I'd recommend first learning, what qualities make for a good knife, kind of the design of the knife, and then learning the different types of steel that you can use for knife making. Once you learn the different steel types and properties, it's important to learn how to heat treat the steel, how to turn a soft piece of steel into a properly treated blade that is hard enough to retain an edge and yet tough enough to sustain, impact. So unfortunately, you can't have, there's no such thing as a perfect knife that is both tough and hard. Because if it's hard, it's sharp. If it's tough, it's soft. So you've got to pick and choose and find the sweet spot where you're getting a little bit of both. But you can't have a purely hard knife and also expect toughness. There's a trade-off between the two. So, and that's another reason why I do my own heat treatment, and I use what's called I use a differential quench or differential heat treatment. So when I heat treat my knife blades, the spine, the tang, the handles are all soft or tougher, and my edge is harder in order to take a good edge. And that combination, when you go buy a knife through a manufacturer or some type of company that produces knives on a large scale, they're going to heat treat your knife the same. It's going to have the same heat treatment from tip all the way to the pommel, from front to back. It's going to have the same heat treatment because most companies can't afford or want to save money by not having to heat treat the knife in different zones and areas of the knife. It's just cost prohibited. And so, you'll see some knives break in common areas because, it's treated perhaps to hold an edge, and if it snaps, let's see, I got off track here. If it snaps, let's say along the choil here, that's because it has the same hardness as your edge. But if you harden the edge of a blade and make sure that the spine and the choil and the handle are soft, it's going to be able to withstand and flex, during use. And so you get both properties of hardness and toughness. And so by, handcrafted knives that are made by knife makers can be heat treated in such a way that you get both elements into a blade. And every knife that I make has that heat treatment. Okay, so I'm almost to the end here. And so as you get towards the end of a stitch, what you've got to do in order to have a strong stitch on your sheath is you want to go in reverse and kind of backtrack along your 3 to 4 stitches. And what you're doing there is you're doubling over. So we're almost to the end here. So once we get to this last hole, I'm going to go backwards and go in reverse for about 3 or 4 stitch lines, and then I'm going to end on the back of the sheath. I'm going to trim the excess, leaving about a 1/4 inch of thread left, and then I'm going to fuse it with a lighter. And what that does is it prevents it from fraying during use. A lot of times, I've seen sheaths made where the last stitch hole is where they terminate the thread, And what ends up happening is as soon as you stick the knife in, it basically starts pulling apart. It's because they never reinforced it or never, properly seated the stitching, whether it's a knot or fusing. And that's a problem with a lot of sheaths that come out of, you know, production companies, whether they're made in China or elsewhere. So, okay. So this is at the end. I'm just going to set that aside. I'm going to complete these last stitches, and then I'm going to go in reverse and I'll show you what I was talking about. Okay, so I'm at the end. I'm going to give it a nice firm tug, make sure every stitch is seated. Now I'm just going to pick a needle and I'm going to go in reverse. So I'm going to go to the hole behind it. So this is where you probably need a set of pliers because you're doubling up your stitches. It gets a little tough getting that needle through because it already has thread in it. So you do that. I'm going to go through the next hole. And again, I'm going in reverse because we're going to terminate our stitching, and we want our stitch to be able to withstand use, and we don't want it falling apart. Okay, so this will be the last hole it'll go into. I'll pull it and tug it. I'll go ahead and remove that needle. And now I'll pick up the second needle and use the same process. So it's coming out of this hole. I go right into the hole above it. And I'm going to use pliers. Go to the next hole. Okay, and this will be the last hole for this one. Let's see, my needle came off, so I got to put it back on. Okay, last hole here. And we're going to end up with both needles on the back side. And I'll show you the purpose behind that. All the way through, remove the needle. Now I'm going to give both of these a really good tug. Okay, now this is where we ended up on the back of the sheath, right? So here's the belt loop. This is the back side that'll go against the body. And so you want to end on the back side really for aesthetic purposes, you know, so that you got a nice clean stitch line in the front, no fraying, no ends. And in order to clean this up on the back, I'm going to trim. And you can see how much I left there. And so this is waxed artificial sinew. It'll fuse really nice. It's almost kind of like paracord. It's super strong, but thin. So I heat it, let it melt in, and then I just press down to fuse it and seal it. And you can see that's nice and flush. It's all fused. Okay, so now we're going to check for some fitment. Okay, so here's the knife. Got our sheath. So this is our blade in. This is for right-handed wear. So I'm kind of squeezing in on it to open it up. I don't want to jam it in there just yet. And because I have this leather wrap on it, you know, it's got to make sure that it can accommodate that. So without pushing too hard, I seat it where I think it's going to be at. And then I'm going to start feeling, see where the tip is at. So my tip is about right here, just before the welt. So our welt, remember our welt, which is the piece of leather that's sandwiched between the sheath, which protects our stitching, that basically runs from here all the way to the mouth of the sheath. So I want to make sure that the tip isn't going to penetrate the bottom of that sheath. So I'm going to back it off just a notch. And so there's two things we can do to make sure that the knife doesn't inadvertently or accidentally get shoved in there and then it penetrates our sheath. So you can do one of two things. You can wet mold it, which we would wet the leather sheath, and once it's wet, we would basically press down on the leather and it would form fit the leather to the knife. And so when you do that, the leather absorbs the water, and then by pressing, you mold it, you form fit it, pull the knife out, and then you let the sheath completely dry. And usually that's about a couple hours, depending on the temperature or where you have it stored at. But once it's completely dry, the sheath actually turns really hard, almost like a plastic Kydex. And so the sheath at that point is going to have, because of the molding, it's going to have its own stop point, so that when you put it in, the molding is going to hold and grip that knife and prevent it from going down any further if you molded it properly in the right location. So that's option one. Option two is to take a copper rivet and put a copper rivet in the sheath, which serves as a stopping point for the knife itself. So it's a physical, you know, item that is going to prevent the knife from sinking any further into the sheath to, you know, mitigate that blade coming through at the bottom. So let me grab a rivet and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so here is our copper rivet. I think this is like a 3/4 inch. I think this is a number 9. It's made out of pure copper, and then it's got it looks like a washer. I'm trying to remember what they call it. So basically it's a washer, but there is another technical name, and it just passes my head right now. So anyhow, this is a very good, very strong rivet to hold leather. In fact, these rivets are used by saddle makers, and you can find these at like Tractor Supply. You know, if they sell like horse tack, you'll find them, or you can get these online as well. And you can find these in brass too. What I like about the copper is that I can cut it easily, and then I can also peen it down with a small hammer pretty easily as well. And it you know, they're real strong for how we use them with knives and knife sheaths. Okay, so let's see, I'm gonna put, so if I want a stopping point, it's gonna have to be right in this area here. And I'm going to double check my end, my tip. So the tip is in a good location. So this rivet will have to go somewhere about right in here. And then what I don't want is, I don't want the blade scraping up against this, because then it'll dull in the edge. So we've got to make sure that, one, we have it in there really nice and tight, and we don't want to get so far towards the blade that the blade's going to be hitting every time. So we just need enough pressure in this location to basically grab the finger guard or prevent that finger guard from going any further in the sheath. All right, let's do it. Okay, so there's my finger guard. And I need a hole. Basically, let's see, this is going to be right in here. Make the hole right there. Let me grab a hole punch. Okay, so I've got a hole punch here. What I'm gonna do now is get this punched. So I'm gonna grab the sheath. And I don't have my small anvil. My wife is actually using it. Otherwise I'd do it right up here on the countertop. So I'm gonna move the camera, take you all along with me outside to my anvil. And let's get this moved here. All right, so this is my anvil. It's outdoors. There we go. So that is our hole for our copper rivet. So back indoors, there's my forge. So let's head back in. Make sure this camera is all set up back the way it was. Apologize for the shakiness while I get this thing straightened out here. Okay. All right, so back to where we were at. So here's the copper rivet. I'm just gonna feed it through. There's our burr. That's what it's called. It's called the burr. It slipped my mind earlier. I was calling it a washer, but it's actually called the burr. So take the burr, sit it on top of the rivet, and now I'm going to come to this small little vise I have here, and I'm going to use this small area to seat the burr. So I'm going to put the back of the rivet, this back side. I'm just going to set it down So it's got contact with the backside of this vise. And I'm just going to put my pliers on top, kind of hold it down, take my hammer, make sure that burr is nice and seated. Which it is. So now I'm going to trim the excess, leaving enough copper to be able to peen this down, which I have. So now I'm just going to use that same edge. Get a little bit of a bigger hammer here and just start peening this down. Okay, there we go. Just clean up the sheath. Let's go back to our original location. So here's our knife, and let's check that for fitment. There we go. Here you can see where the finger guard is stopping right at that rivet. And the blade is nowhere near the rivet, which is good. You don't want the edge scraping up against it. That's going to dull your knife. So I think we've got a real nice stopping point. And then double check the tip. Tip is about 1/8 of an inch at least, if not 1/4 of an inch from the welt or the bottom of the sheath, so it's not making contact, which is what you want. So I've got a nice opening here at the mouth because of the leather wrap, and if the owner decides to take the leather wrap off, the knife will still fit. So there's the backside. And there it is. If you like it, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. I do have, I think right now I'm over 70 videos. I do a lot of knife making. I try to film the knives basically from start to finish on my channel. And then I get into, some tips on knife making. And I'm going to expand into other areas in the future, that has to do with knife making, obviously, but, just to change things up. So it's, it's not just, one knife after another being made. I want to change it up, try to focus in on like maybe some specific areas, like, how do I, put in these textured notches into my handles. Like that could be a specific topic covered. And like on this knife blade, I forced the patina on it so I could cover, the method that I use. I actually hand built an electrochemical machine. I wouldn't recommend, if you don't know much about electricity, I wouldn't try to make one, but but that's what I use. And it's basically electricity, salt, and water. And what it does is it puts a patina on the blade. It looks rustic, and it actually protects the blade, because this is a high carbon steel blade, and it'll rust easy. So having that patina on this blade actually helps protect the knife from corroding too fast. So and I think it just looks great. I love frontier looking knives, and that's what inspires my knife work. If you want a brand new looking knife, or a knife that's more modern, then there's companies out there that I can't compete with, and they're very good at doing that. My knives are going to be handmade. They're going to be frontier style, rustic, but I'm going to use very, very good products: genuine leather, American oak, American steel. If I don't use American steel, then I'm using German steel. And so that's kind of it. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to be filming another video in the future. And again, please like and subscribe. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video, and I hope you have a good day and Happy New Year's. Take care.